Welcome to Parent Coaches Unleashed with Carrie and Jessica, where no topics are taboo or off limits. Join us as we let loose and discuss the real, raw feelings about parenting.
In each episode, we will bring you heartfelt discussions, real-life stories, and special guests that will both entertain you and encourage community so no one feels alone in their parenting journey.
Thanks so much for listening. Now let's start the show. This one is going to be a little different than some of our previous episodes, as it may not pertain to all of our listeners, yet it is such an important topic to discuss.
Agreed. Hi, everybody. I would like to welcome Jenny Shane, who is the founder of Divorce in Peace. She is a Florida Supreme Court certified family mediator, a Florida bar licensed attorney, a certified divorce specialist through National Association of Divorce. She has been working in the legal field for almost 18 years. She is a divorce coach that helps guide individuals through all stages of divorce and life afterwards. When she's not busy with work, she is busy with 3 daughters. Please welcome to the show, Jenny Shane.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me today.
We are so excited. We've been meeting so many people in our podcast, so we are just so excited to have you on today and to have met you. But I have to be honest, I don't know what a divorce coach is. So I'm hoping you could share some information with us to let us know what that is, what you do, and how did you end up in this field of work?
Sure. So you're not alone. Most people don't know what a divorce coach is. And honestly, until probably about 4+ years ago, I myself didn't totally understand what that title meant. Um, I'll give you a quick background how I got into this, and then I'll explain what I do because it'll kind of follow naturally.
Sure.
I stopped practicing law as a lawyer probably about 10 years ago or so and started focusing on family mediation. I found that with my background and my education, it was a better fit for me. My personality is not litigious. I didn't want to do transactional work. I wanted to truly make an impact on people's lives. And I saw myself gravitating towards the family law world. And because I'm a lawyer, obviously staying in the legal realm made the most sense for me. So I got certified as a family mediator here in Florida, and I immediately started my own mediation practice. And I focused very quickly on working with individuals who did not want to hire lawyers and who wanted to do it more peacefully, which meant that they wanted to come to all the agreement on everything divorce related before ever filing anything in court. So that's called pre-suit. So I focused working with these people who didn't want to have lawyers and wanted to do it all very clean, simple, straight, streamlined, and honestly less expensive. So for many
Can
years, that's what I've been doing.
Quick question. Is that this is as a mediator?
Correct.
These are
As
all
a
the things.
mediator.
Okay.
Yeah. So this brings me towards how I got to be a divorce coach. During COVID, which was a funky time for many people,
Sure was.
mediation was happening. It was not. It went from in person to remote. It all kind of got very confusing for a while. At that time, I had been hired to work as a mediator for a couple who was already divorced, but needed to sell their now marital home, which belonged to still both of them, but they agreed through their divorce. They would sell it after divorce, clean it up, sell it, and then share the proceeds. Well, now you're asking a couple who don't like each other, have now been divorced, who are not technically a couple, to work together as a team. So I had been hired to mediate. Well, we quickly learned there was nothing legally to mediate. Instead, I wound up helping the now ex-husband who did not have a lawyer anymore. I basically held his hand for 3 months to walk him through the process of what he needed to do legally because of the divorce. So I kind of had my light bulb moment of, wow, that was amazing. I really loved having a direct impact on someone's life, still in the legal world, but not practicing law and not technically doing mediation. So I started exploring my options, quickly fell into this idea of divorce coaching. Well, what does this really mean? As I did some more research on it, I came to realize that When someone goes through a divorce, many times it's a very confusing, overwhelming process. And the only true professional in their world is a lawyer. And the lawyer is there to represent their legal interests, help them through the legal process. But that lawyer isn't doing a lot of the other things that they need. They need emotional support. They need true understanding of what is happening, not just telling me and throwing legal words at me and saying, do this for discovery, fill out these interrogatories, you have a hearing and a deposition. That means nothing to someone who's never been a lawyer or in the legal
Sure.
world. So as I got into it and realized this is a perfect fit for all of my experience, I've now very easily titled myself a divorce coach. And now to answer your questions, what does that mean? What do I do for people? So predominantly my clients come to me at different stages of divorce. They come at the very beginning saying, I'm about to go through a divorce. I don't know what to do. Do I hire a lawyer? Do I not? Or I'm about to have consults. What do I ask? I don't know what to ask during a consultation. How much is too much to be spending on a retainer? Then I have people who come mid divorce who say, divorce is going on. I don't get it. I feel like nothing's happening. I've spent $10,000 on a lawyer, but yet nothing's happened. Help. And then the third type of client I get is someone who is either at the end or has finished and says, okay, now what do I do? Like, I know that I'm not done. I may have a dissolution, which is a divorce judgment. What do I do with this? I know I made agreements. Like, I've been through a hurricane and now I need help.
Sure.
So I step into the role of basically holding their hand through the process with whatever their needs may be, preparing for consultations, understanding what their lawyer's directions are, how to prepare for a deposition that they may need to sit for, answering things for them that their lawyer doesn't have time to do and that they don't want to pay a lawyer to do. So I work differently. I help actually save them on their attorney's fees. So that's kind of in a broad spectrum what I do for clients as a divorce coach.
I am curious, do you find that most of your clients are males or females? And are they typically involving children as well?
Yeah. So I would say, I think about it, 100% of the clients I've worked with over the last 4 years have children.
Okay.
If there are no children, it's usually a bit easier of a divorce. And what they're fighting over is pretty much money. And they don't necessarily need as much guidance there. They need
Okay.
their lawyer to help figure that out. The other question was women versus men. I find that in the divorce world, women with a resounding majority ask for help before men do. So women are seeking out other professionals besides a lawyer. They're looking for a therapist, a coach, someone else to explain, a financial advisor, someone to help them. I do have some male clients, but I feel like in those situations, their wife was the one who initiated the divorce and they sort of are being dragged through the process.
Okay. Do you help both parties, or are you the coach for one of the parties in the divorce?
Yeah. So when I'm purely working in my divorce coach capacity, I only work with one individual because predominantly that person is coming to me saying, not just I need help with the legal process, but they're saying, I need help getting along with my soon to be ex, especially when there's children. We don't co parent well. We can't communicate without arguing. We see things differently. So I'm there to kind of help them improve that relationship so they can work together with their soon to be ex parent.
And is the situation the same for each? Like, do you really get to know their communication and their communication styles, what's working, what's not, to make a recommendation? Or do you have a strategy that usually works that you recommend in all of your divorce coaching situations?
Right. So clearly, if I'm only working with one person, I'm only getting one side of the story, right? I'm not hearing the full picture. But I try to gather enough background context to have an idea of what kind of relationship these two people have, right? And it's not unusual to say that many of the people who do seek help with me have very high conflict and or narcissistic type co-parents, exes. So,
Mm.
I'm able to kind of pick up on keywords and situational things that they tell me where maybe they're not diagnosed narcissists or anything like that, but they're very difficult.
Mhm.
And again, I try to stay as impartial as possible with my actual client, and I will, on many occasion, give my direct client some tough love to say, "Look, you might have done something wrong here too. Let's look at that and let's talk about it." Because even if your ex is the difficult party here, you may have exacerbated it, or you may have poked the bear, or you may have done things in a way to make it worse. So let's evaluate your behavior and how you communicate, and then we can improve how that relationship is. So I kind of am bouncing all around, and I do really try to stay neutral, because if I'm so biased to my own client, I can't really give good advice or good suggestions because it's so one sided. My ultimate goal is to help this person have a better relationship with their ex when they stop working with me. So they don't need my help. They've learned tools and strategies on how to communicate better. Predominantly, communication is where the failure is, which is why they're getting divorced.
Right.
So if I help that one person do it, then they take that with them moving forward, and they don't need me. So that's a big part of how I work with them. So whether they're the agitator or not in that relationship, if I can improve that one person's communication, I can hopefully improve it as a duo, as co-parents.
Jenny, it sounds like you wear a lot more hats than just divorce coach. You have a
Yeah.
lot going on there, a lot of different arenas you have to enter into. Tell me about when kids are involved and you need to work on a parenting plan, a co-parenting plan. What does that look like, especially if you're dealing with one partner who is a narcissist?
hmm So a big portion of my services is that I get a lot of people who are like beginning to mid divorce, where they are at the point where they do need to create what's called a parenting plan. And the parenting plan is something that outlines every single thing you can think about raising a child.
Like, give us some examples, like what would be in a parenting plan?
Extracurricular activities. Can you just enroll, or do you both need to agree? Who's paying for the enrollment, the materials, the supplies, transportation? How are they getting places? Cell phones, who's paying for them? What plan? What if they need a new phone? Those type of things, all that stuff. I mean, there's so much more. That's literally a tiny crumb. But they come to me saying, I know I'm going to have to create this parenting plan. Where do I start? Like, I don't, I hear these stories of all these people, my friends, and this and that, but like, what do I do here? Parenting plans are pretty much universal in the way they read. So I'll give them a template to say, let's work through this together. Let's outline all the major topics that really need to be in your plan, and let's customize it to your specific situation, because there is not one good fill in the blank sheet that works for every family. You
Sure.
have to personalize it. And the people who get maybe lawyers involved, and they really kind of give them a one size fits all parenting plan, and that lawyer for whatever reason doesn't really personalize it to that party, which happens more than you believe.
Hmm.
They will 100% have problems as soon as that divorce is finalized, and many of my clients fall into that category of, my parenting plan is not good enough, now what do I do? Because we can't resolve conflicts.
Is that another type of client that you have that comes back to you after the divorce and something is, or let me rephrase that. They come to you, they didn't use your services during the divorce, but they've come to you now, they've been divorced and they didn't get what they wanted out of the deal.
Correct. So I'm thinking of one client that's been with me for about 2 years now. She came to me at the very end of her divorce, like literally her divorce was finalizing, I think the day after we met.
Mm,
So she didn't need me for that process. She needed me for life after. We call it post divorce. And she knew there would be so many lingering legal obligations and this whole co-parenting thing that she was going to have to get into. And she needed direction. She just didn't know how to navigate it. She falls into that category, unfortunately, of they have a parenting plan that's about 60% complete. And I
mm.
think, unfortunately, and she's realized this now, her lawyer just didn't do a good enough job. Lawyers aren't always great. Some are amazing, some are mediocre, and some are terrible for whatever reason. And the ones who are mediocre and terrible just don't do complete language stipulations in parenting plans. So what happens is, let's say, for instance, this is an example, there's a day off of school, but the school is not an actual holiday. It's just a random school closure. Well, there's no language in her parenting plan on, well, then who gets the time? Is it a mom day or is it a dad day? Because it's not identified.
Mm,
That's a day we don't really know. So if there's no answer in your parenting plan, those parents have literally nowhere to turn for what to do unless they can agree. And you're asking two people who just got divorced to have an agreement, and that usually doesn't go so well, right? So if a parenting plan is not very tight and detail oriented, then you have these little loopholes that happen that could be the most trivial matter, but you have two parents who just don't know how to co-parent. And so they argue and they need help.
So, can a parenting plan be updated with your services without having to go back to court, or that is part of making a change to the legalities or what was
Mhm.
ever decided in the divorce?
So the answer is yes and no. You can change your parenting plan up until that child graduates or turns 18. Okay. But that means you have a mother and a father who are willing to be amicable enough to make these changes and abide by them. But that is rare. It doesn't happen that much. So the legal system does provide you an outlet to modify your parenting plan all the way up until the child is 18 or out of high school. But it's although that pathway is there for you to modify it, it's not necessarily that simple. The court wants to see a significant change. Why do you need a change from every other week to 2 days, 2 days, 5 days schedule? They need to know these things. And if
mm.
you don't have good reason for it, a court is not going to approve a modification of a parenting plan. So a lot of my clients who fall into this hole of, I need a better parenting plan. We start at, I don't just say, okay, let's get you ready to file this in court. I say, let's start logging all of the failures that are happening. We keep very detailed notes of all the violations that your co-parent does to the co-parenting plan. Shows up late, doesn't give notification if they have to travel, doesn't respond within 24 hours when they're supposed to, things like that. So we start logging all of it. So eventually you have a nice long laundry list of violations. Then you can go back to the court and say, Judge, this doesn't work. Look at all of this stuff that my co-parent doesn't do. We need to modify. So that is always there for you, but it's just not necessarily that easy to accomplish.
Okay. So, obviously, the ideal scenario is co parenting 50-50. Both parents are involved and follow the plan. But I know there's other parenting styles. I've heard of parallel parenting. Can you talk to us about what you're seeing in different parenting styles during and after divorce?
Yeah. So a parallel parenting usually winds up happening when you had a high conflict divorce, when you have two parents who just refuse to work together, or one refuses to work with the other. So they basically have two separate households, two separate sets of rules, two separate types of punishments, follow throughs, engagement with that parent, that child. So parallel meaning we're both parenting, but we're not doing it the same. We're doing it differently. And what
Mhm.
we do here may not happen here. And there's really no crossover. That is very common in these high conflict divorces. And a less high conflict, you'll see what's a little bit more of like a collaborative parenting where they may not do it the same, but they try to stay generally on the same page. And they inform each other when there's a problem. My child's not doing well in school. Here's what I hear. What are you hearing? And let's try to solve it or at least take care of it together and not in like separate silos.
Okay.
Somewhere along the line, does somebody say this isn't in the best interest of our child? Or in these high conflict divorces, do people just completely lose sight of that?
Yeah, the latter.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the reason they get high conflict is because they refuse to see the other party's position or perspective. They're so focused on their own needs and wants through the divorce that they fail to see what else is happening around them. So I do my best to coach at least my client to understand that always lead with best interest of the child. Whenever you're making a decision, ask yourself first, am I doing this in the best interest of my child?
Sure.
You can't answer that yes. That means you're making a decision based on your needs. And then you're not doing what is right for the child and the situation. So it's kind of like a quick way to tell someone you may, and this is a good comment because this is something I also remind my clients a lot is you need to love your children more than you hate your ex.
Yeah.
And honestly, that says it all. I don't need to
Yes.
explain that anymore.
Nope.
Mm-mm.
So
Perfect.
that's what I remind my clients when they're having a lot of co-parenting dramas coming up is I know you hate him and I know he drives you crazy and stresses you out, but you love your children and their happiness and their safety more. So make your decisions from that place, not from your feelings with your ex. It's a hard thing. It's easy to say, hard thing to do in practical purposes, but at least the constant reminder kind of puts them in check.
Yeah.
Have you ever had any pushback on that one?
No, because it really stops them in their
Mhm.
tracks. Again, remember the people who are working with me are being proactive.
Right.
They're saying, I know I need help. I don't, I wish I didn't need help, but I know I need help. So when I do give them that tough love and kind of put it back on them to say, like, are you doing the right thing? It makes them stop and think. And I usually wind up getting a response later of like, thanks for that perspective. I didn't think of it that way.
That's invaluable right there, your
Yeah.
service.
Exactly, yeah.
Do you find when there's an agreement on time sharing and going back and forth from both parents' homes that you're asked to assist one of the parents or each of the parents on what if the child is having trouble with the transition or
Mhm.
is refusing to go to one parent's home? They're more comfortable in dad's home or mom's home, and when there's multiple children, right? What
Yeah.
are some of your recommendations? And I don't know if you can give us any examples of
Yeah.
how you've helped your clients with that.
So, the best way to answer that question is that it really changes depending on the age of the child.
Hmm.
As they're young, they don't really get much of a choice when it comes to transition, right? They just are they go where they're driven. They may kick and scream and cry and have humongous meltdowns, and I have a client that I've been working with also from the very beginning, whose son is now just turned 4, and every time he has to go to his father's, it's a whole to-do meltdown.
Mm.
She eventually was able to get him into some therapy and have it actually diagnosed as separation anxiety, which is true, and she's able to use that through her court case with her ex for they're having time sharing custody disputes. That will be taken into account by a court, that there is true separation, especially when you have one child who predominantly is raised by one parent, and then all of a sudden now they're doing this co-parenting back and forth timeshare exchange, and the child doesn't acclimate well. And, really in that situation, you do your best to cater to your child's need. The exchanges may not be a quick handover. It might be a 30, 45-minute exchange that comes with patience and time. I always suggest to my clients who are in those positions where you have children who cannot transition well to get help. Get a therapist involved to help you and your child work together and come up with ideas like having a security lovey that comes with you from place to place, right? Any things that help the child feel safe and comfortable. And again, like I said at the beginning, it depends on age. It really does change given the child's age. Now let's talk about the opposite of that. When you have a teen who may be able to drive at this point, who's supposed to be sharing time back and forth with each parent, it is nearly impossible. And I've seen this come up with clients too, to tell your teenager, you need to go sleep at dad's house tonight. And they're like, yeah, no, I'm not going to dad's because I don't want to. You
Right.
don't even have to have a reason.
Sure.
No, I'm not going. And in that scenario, unfortunately, there is no repercussion for that child, and there's nothing you can do as a parent. And the parent who's missing out on this on the time sharing can't do anything. You can't call the police. You can't report that. Police
Right.
will not get involved in a family matter of that style. They'll
Mm.
say, go to the court, call a lawyer. It's not like you're preventing the time sharing. That child is old enough to make their own decisions.
So, at what age do you recommend or see that it's important to involve the teen and have a say in the time sharing? Like, is it 13? Is it 15, 16 when they're driving?
Yeah, I like to work with my clients when they're having these difficult exchanges with their children when they're about middle school age, they get to be at 12, 13, they're opinionated and they care about where they want to be. They don't like their clothes at that house, or they don't like that it's far from their friends, or there's nothing to do there. Or here's a big one. This comes up all the time. Dad doesn't let me look at my phone. Dad takes my phone away. What am I going to do? I have nothing to do. I'm so bored, right? That comes up all the time, the devices, and that kind of also goes back to what we said before about this sort of parallel parenting, where parents don't their rules are different. And if their rules are different, as the child gets older, they're going to prefer one household over the other. And what do you do in that situation? Well, your first step, as especially if you're the parent who is being more proactive, working with a coach or trying to get involved more, you I say to them, these are the conversations. It's time to have these conversations with your child and really try to find out what's going on. What's preventing them from going to their other house? Why are they unhappy? What's different over there than is happening here? And then it's also encouraging them to get professional help. Go to a school counselor, go to another professional counselor, but you need to intercede in some which way, because what will happen if you don't, and if you just kind of let this be, is that as the child gets older, the relationship with that parent will just suffer, and it won't be there because the parent who is missing out on this time can't really do anything about it, and they just sort of give up, and that relationship breakdown starts happening. And it's unfortunate, but it takes two parents to have the same level of engagement with their child and to truly be working together to put their child in, as we go back to the best interest, to put them in the best position to be successful given these two households. And if one parent cares and one parent doesn't really, it's not going to work.
I have to imagine that is probably the most difficult part of your job, of divorce, of all of it, when you have such differing opinions and when people lose sight of what's best for the child and put their own emotions in front of their child's.
Yeah. I'd say it's extremely sad for me, especially because I'm a parent as well, when you see how one parent is trying really hard to do what's best for their child, and the other parent is so one-sided and blinded by their own needs and maybe not even noticing what's going on with the child, that they just do their own thing and they don't really care, and they're very blinded by what is happening. And I'll give you a little example. I have a client that I work with that they have one child. She's 14, so she's finishing 8th grade, and she just hates going to her father's house. But she also never had a very strong relationship with him to begin with, but it doesn't matter. This is the situation she goes.
How old was the child when they got
They just
divorced?
divorced. So
Okay.
recent.
Okay.
But what's happening is she feels so unsafe and uncomfortable and awkward in her father's home because he takes her phone away, needs passwords for everything, doesn't let her do anything, forces her to watch TV with him. You have to watch a movie with me. We need to go grocery shopping together. Like they can't just exist together. It has to always be because I don't see you a lot, so we're going to do everything together. And you can't have access to your other life when you're at my house. She at one point didn't want to sleep in her bed. She was sleeping in the closet
Oh my
because she felt
goodness.
Oh,
uncomfortable. And she
oh.
felt that she only had privacy if she could go in the closet.
Mm.
So her mom, who's my client, would tell me, yeah, she tells me when she gets home that she's been sleeping in the closet. She said,
Oh my
well, mom, it's
goodness.
the only place I have privacy. Right. So And the mom obviously is taking every step possible to try to help her daughter, but when her daughter's at her ex's house, her hands are tied. There's only so much she can do, and she's trying to empower her daughter, to teach her to speak up for herself, and especially at the age she is, she's about to go into high school. You need to be, work on your confidence and speaking up, and if you don't feel good speaking to him, then write him a letter. We're coming up with all these different strategies on how to communicate better from the child to the father. But this is still a 14-year-old. We all know what teens do, what they want to do, and if she'd rather just stay in the closet because she feels it's more private, it's what she's going to do, and it's heartbreaking.
I'm guessing in this situation, it was not amicable
No,
and she's not able
very
to
high
have a
conflict.
conversation with
Correct.
her ex about
And again, that you see common themes here. When you have these high conflict divorces, it usually means the married couple could not communicate to any level of reasonableness. They just can't. And so because of that, then that affects their co-parenting relationship after divorce. So if they couldn't communicate well while married, they're definitely not communicating while they're not married.
Yeah, and I've seen situations where in a divorce where one does try to communicate to the ex on behalf of the children, it actually makes it worse
Hmm.
for the child,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And if the child feels like they're in the middle of the two parents
Yep.
battle or bad communication or whatever it is. So,
So that's one of the feedbacks I get often from multiple clients is, I'm afraid to say something to him because I know he's going to take it out on our child.
yeah.
Take the phone away, not let them go see friends, just some sort of repercussion. And they're not always wrong. That may happen. And so, what you do is try to empower your child as young as 5 to start speaking up for themselves and having a voice, because truly that's all you can do. And or trying to funnel them into some sort of family therapy, individual therapy for the child to start learning techniques on how to be more verbal with the co-parent they are not comfortable with. There's limited resources out there, and it's a very sad situation. I wish I could say there's an easy fix, but there is not.
I admire these parents who are trying to empower their kids to speak up for themselves. Have you encountered a situation where therapy is the best solution, but one of the parents won't agree to it? Do both parents have to agree to medical decisions or mental health decisions?
Yeah, okay, so there's a few questions there. The first one is, though, it depends on what their parenting plan says. Parenting plan is basically their rule book when they're divorced on how to raise their child together, because there's nothing else to point to. So that's why I said before, if you don't put all this language into
Right.
your parenting plan, it doesn't exist. So if you put in your parenting plan, and many people are starting to, because in the last, 10 years, mental health has become so much more important. So they put in their language that if the child needs mental health counseling, that either parent can get them, or maybe they have to agree or something. Like, it's not just missed, at least it's addressed to some
Mhm.
degree in a parenting plan. So I'll always first tell my client, what does your parenting plan say? Does it give you the ability to go get them a counselor? Does your ex have to agree? If not, go get him a counselor. Don't wait. And then it's like, well, what about paying for it? Well, what language is in your parenting plan about sharing these medical or out of pocket medical costs? Because usually it will fall in an out of pocket medical costs, uncovered. So then, do you share those things 50-50? Do you pay 100% because you're the one who sought that help? It's so specific to that
Sure.
family. But the good news is that language does has started to come up more and more in parenting plans, with the anticipation that the child may need some counseling at some point, and we are going to address it. But I always tell them, if it's not in there, let's say there's no language in your parenting plan about what to do for mental health, I will say, go get the mental health. Go get your own therapist, but just remember, you're probably bearing the burden of the cost, but you know it's worth it, and your child needs it. So if there's nothing in there, then they can really do whatever they want. And then your other question was about, what happens if you have one and the other parent is not really helping. So that parent who does then want the counseling has to bear 100% responsibility, scheduling those appointments on your time sharing. Don't do it when they're at the other parent's house because they're
Right.
probably not going, right? So you just take on the full amount of responsibility for it. But I would say it's surprisingly, even in these high conflict situations, both parents wind up agreeing to the therapy. It may not be so simple, but they agree and they do their best to show up or to bring the child or to engage to some level. I
Mhm.
haven't quite seen it where one party is like, no way, I'm not doing it. It's not happening. I haven't seen that yet. So that's a positive in the sense of both parents recognize when the child needs help. It's just one may feel much more strongly about it than the other.
Okay. You seem really so well versed in everything that has to do with divorce. You yourself are not divorced, correct?
No, I'm not. I've actually been married for 18 years, together longer than that. And I actually think that helps me, right? I haven't yet, which is surprising. I was very intimidated when I started going into this years ago that I would be judged by clients that I'm not divorced. What do you know? You
Right.
can't help. But instead, I actually see it as like a superpower, which is I'm not divorced. I have been in a successful relationship for about 25 years
Wow.
and we're raising three children together. We're not perfect. We have our moments. But the thing that I can teach you is how to communicate with your spouse better,
Ugh,
whether you're
right
married
there.
or not. I will teach you how to communicate because almost 100% of your marital problems comes down to communication.
I feel like
100%.
that's the bottom line of all of our
I was just
relationships
I
with
was
You're
our
right. With your
kids, with
with
yes.
our
teenagers
spouse,
and your
with our
kids too.
friends, with our parents.
Right.
Communication is the key factor in all of it.
I
Uh-huh.
just I
Yeah.
just thought of a new like we should all become communication coaches. That's it.
But truly, that's where it all
That's
stems from, right?
Sure, it is.
We
Yeah,
are
absolutely.
communication coaches, but in a niche,
yeah.
right?
Yes.
Yeah,
There we
because
go.
if you can improve communication, things improve, your overall relationship gets better. And one of the things I do for my clients, which they love, is I help them literally draft messages and emails to their ex. I was doing it before we got on the podcast here, right? I have a client who says I need to email, this is actually relevant, she needs to email her ex about swim lessons for their child because they had a verbal discussion about swim lessons over the summer, and she went ahead and enrolled back in swim lessons. But when she sent that message to her ex 4 or 5 days ago, she has yet to receive a response. Well, she can't just keep waiting. She's going to lose out on the lessons, right? So she's like, what do I do? And I said, you need to send a follow up response, whatever. So she did, and she drafted it and sent it to me, kind of with a, what do you think? And I read it and I said, if it's a good message, if you want it to sound a bit aggressive and emotionally charged, because that's how I read it. If you
I'm
don't
sure
care,
she
then
was
send
when
that.
she wrote it as
Right.
well.
Right. I said, if you don't care about that, then send it. But if you do, we need to strip a lot of that out and be very direct. So I said, redraft it and send it to me again. And so even before I just got on here, I was seeing her new draft, which probably was cut in half. And now it was direct to the point.
Mhm. Just the
I sent
facts.
you this. You didn't respond. We're supposed to co parent together. I need a response by this date. End of sentence.
Yeah.
And I
Less
wrote back,
less is
perfect.
more. Yeah.
Right?
Right. And
All of it.
she's like, you're right. And that's a big part of my service with my clients is being able to access me all the time so I can get ahead of them starting a whole argument.
Mhm.
That would have started a whole big argument for her and him. And instead, by interceding and saying, I know how you feel and I know where you're coming from. But if you send that as is, you're starting World War III. Let's
Sure.
not do that. Let's try again. And when you're in that situation, you can't see the emotionally charged sentences you're writing, right? You don't get it. You're just writing how you think you would communicate. But when you're divorced from someone, and you're especially someone who might be high conflict, you have to communicate in a completely different style. So working with them to first recognize what they're doing, that's the first step. It's like, you see what you did here? Let's point it out. Let's read it together. And then it's kind of like, oh, yeah, I guess you're right. I need to choose my words better. Um, and then through practice, they start learning how to be more direct and more succinct, eliminating all the emotional fluff. And then they're like, wow, that is very different than how I was communicating. So that's a big piece of how I work with my clients. But like we said, it all boils down to
Mhm.
communication. And if you're in it, you
Absolutely.
can't see it, but getting support from someone else who says it to you differently, same words, but said differently, it rings a bell and you're like, oh, okay, now I see how I've not been doing it properly. And hopefully this will fix parts of their relationship.
You know, nobody enters into marriage thinking, oh, eventually I'm going to need a coach. Nobody goes in thinking this is how it's going to turn out. But I on behalf of all divorced parents out there, I think what you're doing is amazing and so, so helpful to so many. How do people find you if they want to get in touch with you?
Yeah. So the best place to find me actually is on Instagram. I kind of built this business on Instagram, so I sort of live over there. So my account is called Family Talk with Jenny.
Okay.
And through there, I DM. That's actually how I communicate with a lot of my clients is through DM. That way it's like immediate texting. My email is another great way to reach me. It's Jenny at divorceinpeacemediation.com. It's kind of long. That's why I send everybody to just go to Instagram because it's a
We'll
lot
have
easier.
we'll have these links on
Yeah,
our
I would say those are my two
site for
best
you.
ways, but really Instagram is like my second home.
All
Great.
right, great. This has been
Yeah.
amazing, so insightful. And, I know there's probably a lot of people listening that don't even know that you're out there and ready
Yeah.
to help them. So, thank you so much for taking the time and
Of
talking with
course.
us today.
I
Thanks for
appreciate you
being with
ladies
us.
having me on. I'm happy to help any of your clients, and this was a wonderful conversation. So thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks, Jenny. Thank you for listening to this episode of Parent Coaches Unleashed with Carrie and Jessica. Together, we can raise the next generation of independent, capable, and compassionate young adults.
We encourage you to send us an email with questions and feedback to info@parentcoachesunleashed.com. Please remember, you are not alone on this parenting journey.